Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, the UCI are back banning things. This time, teammate celebrations. I'll be looking at exactly what that means and what the sanctions will be, as well as giving an update on what's happened to Caleb Ewan. I'll also be going over the first road racing of the year because Australia had their national champs last week, and I'll be wrapping up a weekend of cyclocross nationals too. This week in the world of racing, we learnt that road racing is back. The Australian national champs took place in Perth last week, so stay tuned for some race reports later on. We also learnt that yet more new kits have been unveiled for 2025. So this is what EF Education Easy Post will look like this year. I'm still a fan of that, I do like that kit. Whilst Q36.5 have changed theirs quite significantly, this is what their riders will be in this year. Classy, but not particularly exciting, is how I would describe that. And finally, we learned that celebrating your teammate's win is now a sanctionable offence under new UCI rules. I shall read the new regulation under Article 2.12.007, which is a table of race incidents relating to road events. Rule 5.2 now states, rider decelerating during a sprint and endangering other riders, in brackets, knowingly staying within the line of other riders, celebrating in the bunch, talking on the radio or taking hands off handlebars while in the bunch, end of brackets. Now, how this new rule is implemented remains to be seen. I scanned a few UCI documents and I couldn't find a definition of bunch. How many riders need to be in a group to make it a bunch? The first teammate celebration that came into my mind was when Jasper Philipsen celebrated behind Mathieu van der Poel at the 23 Paris-Roubaix. At the time, he was only with Wout Van Aert, so hardly a bunch, so I'm going to assume that he would still be able to do that this year, if the same scenario played out. However, this celebration by Barbara Gorici behind her teammate Lotte Kopecky would probably result in a fine, which incidentally will vary depending on the level of the race and whether or not it's a stage race. But it's going to be somewhere between 100 and 500 Swiss francs, plus a relegation to the last place of your group if it's a one-day race, or penalties in the point and or mountains classification, and a relegation to last place of your group if it's a stage race, plus the same sort of fine. Now the UCI are doing this to try and increase safety, to reduce the chances of crashes in the bunch. And given how much we all want the sport to be safer, I'm reluctant to criticise any measures that could help that, however small the chances might be. However, I am struggling to think of a time when a teammate celebration caused or almost caused a crash in a professional bunch. Maybe I've missed one, let me know. Now, it should also be stated that sanctioning riders for celebrating a teammate's win is not new. Edward Plancart paid 200 Swiss francs and got a yellow card for doing it at La Vuelta last year, where the UCI said it impeded Victor Campenaert's sprint. I mean, I would disagree with that. Plancart was already behind, or at the very least alongside Campenaerts when he started celebrating. Yes, he was slowing down by that point, but all lead-out riders are going to slow down once their lead-out is done. So personally, I'm a little disappointed in this new rule. Every single rider in the world, including Tadej Pogacar, lose more races than they win. Some very good pro riders never win a race, but they do help others to do so. That is cause for celebration. Like when a teammate scores a goal in football, can you imagine how strange it would look if only the goal scorer was allowed to celebrate? So I just hope that the UCI commissaires are sensible when it comes to implementing this rule this year. If a rider goes so over the top in their celebrations that they put others in danger, absolutely, fine them, relegate them, whatever. But if it's perfectly safe to celebrate, please let them carry on doing it. It's another charming part of the sport that should not be confined to the history books, in my opinion. But let me know your thoughts as well. What do you think of this new rule? You can write your opinions in the comments section below. Speaking of which, there were a lot of comments underneath last week's show talking about Wout Van Aert's call for smaller gears to make things safer. Nutella1043 said, to improve safety, better route planning like no downhill finishes, less technical finishes with less road furniture and sharp turns, race organisers must ensure better padding on the highest risk speed corners and better tracking of riders on course, in brackets on-body spot tracker. Stephen Newton said, a big danger is road furniture, whilst Detroit Johnny said, it's worth a try. It's a low-cost, easily reversible change, not as effective at improving course safety though. And that is a really good, simple point. It is probably worth a try. As Stephen says, if it doesn't work, you can very easily go back to how it was without it costing an arm and a leg. The worst that can happen is that riders are forced to spin at very high speeds on descents, and that proves even more dangerous. But I think that's probably quite unlikely. Right then, moving on to the first road racing of the season. The Australian National Champs took place at a new venue this year. So after 18 years in Victoria, the event moved to Perth, where it was held for the first time since 1997. The men's road race was an epic by all accounts. Luke Durbridge attacked on the very first lap with only Connor Lee for company. With 80 k's to go though, Durbridge found himself alone, and the only point at which he got company was when three-time defending champion and teammate Luke Plapp bridged across to him. Rather than drop his teammate though, Plapp coached and coaxed him through the final lap and gifted Durbridge the win. That was Durbridge's second road title, having taken his first at the age of 21, 12 years ago. And to make the win even more special, Durbridge won in front of his home crowd, and his emotions at the finish line were quite something to behold. It was quite the Sunday for Jayco, or Liv Alula Jayco, who also won the women's race with 20-year-old Lucinda Stewart. She rides for their continental squad and found herself in a group up the road that gained 6 minutes on the favourites behind. They were never caught, and Stewart outsprinted the rest of the group at the finish line. Jayco also won the men's individual time trial with Luke Plapp and the women's criterium with Amber Pate. The men's criterium, though, was won by Sam Welsford, and the women's individual time trial by Brodie Chapman, now of UAE Team ADQ. On to cyclocross then, and our start in Belgium, where we had two brand new national champions. Sanne Cant has won the women's event every year since 2010, so 15 times in a row, but that domination came to an end this season. Cant had already stated this time last year that she wouldn't compete at the national champs this time around, as she's retiring at the end of the season and wanted to ensure the Belgian colours would be worn next season. Mario Norbert Ribeiro was the rider to step up to the plate, beating Laura Verdonschot by 45 seconds. In the men's, Thibaut Nace took his first elite title 11 years after his dad Sven took the last of his 9 titles. 21-year-old Thibaut Del Grosso continued to show his potential to be one of the world's very best by winning the Dutch title, whilst Puk Pieterse dominated the women's there, beating Alvarado by over a minute. Felipe Ort wasn't really challenged in Spain. He took his 7th consecutive title there, where Sofia Rodriguez won the women's. Cam Mason was in a class of his own here in the UK, beating Ben Chilton by over 3 minutes, but it was a much closer battle in the women's. In the end, Sam Crace got the better of Kat Ferguson to take her first cyclocross national title. Kevin Kuhn and Rebecca Esterman started as favourites in Switzerland and both lived up to that billing, whilst Clément Venturini and Amandine Fouquenet won in France. 18-year-old Barnabas Vash, brother of Blanca, won the elite title in Hungary, whilst Marie Schreiber took her 3rd elite title in Luxembourg. Only 9 to go now until she levels up with Christine Majerus. I will leave cyclocross there for now. There are just too many results to go through all of them, unfortunately. So I'll move on to other news. Caleb Ewan has gone missing. This was reported by Dan Benson on his Substack last week. Ewan's contract with Jayco at Alula was due to run through this season, but he's not on Jayco's website as one of their riders for 2025. Now, a rumour I heard from a very good source last year, and one that I also heard Johan Brunel talk about on the Move podcast too, is that Ewan had received an offer from Astana, which he decided to take, thus breaking his current contract with Jayco. However, Astana then backed out, and Jayco refused to let Ewan back in, leaving him without a team. In the time since then, it appears that he hasn't been able to find anywhere else, which if true, is a bit of a sorry situation all round. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to see a rider of that quality bow out of the sport in that way, even if it was his own fault if he did break the contract that he had. Better news though for Tim Merlier and his lead-out rider Bert van Leeuwenberger. They've both signed 3-year extensions to their contracts with Soudal Quickstep. In other news, Wout Van Aert will once again skip the Italian races this spring in order to concentrate on the cobbled classics. Just like last year, Van Aert will head to altitude instead of competing at Tirreno, Milano-San Remo or Paris-Nice. Here's hoping he actually makes it to the start line of Flanders and Roubaix this time around though. He's going to start his season in high-end Paraiso, the gravel race, and then do Algarve and Omloop, and then the cobbled classics. After which he'll have a short break before building up to a Giro Tour double Grand Tour. FDJ-Suez have signed a pretty big deal. They've partnered up with Nike, who are now their official lifestyle apparel supplier. I don't know the ins and outs of that deal, but fantastic to have such a big brand coming back into cycling. And just finally, the Dutch Cycling Federation are spending over €200,000 training up motorbike outriders. It's been widely documented that there's a shortage of police outriders for the major Dutch races this year, so it's good to see the federation taking matters into their own hands. Right, that is all for this week. Don't forget though, that the Women's Santos Tour Down Under starts this Friday. You'll be able to watch that and a full season of bike racing live on Discovery Plus and Max, and the men's race is going to follow straight after. Can't wait for both of those. Okay, I'll be back next Monday to wrap up the women's TDU and the Benidorm UCI Cyclocross World Cup. See you then. And so I'll move on to other news, and the first bitch, Jesus Christ. There's a bit for the end of the video, handed to you on a plate. I'm going to leave cyclocross there for now. Just too many results to go through all of them. What the f*** are you on about?